It's time to go into business for yourself. Get ready for another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. Education, insight, and inspiration. Here's your host, small business and franchise expert, Tom Scarda.
Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. My name is Tom Scarda, and I am the host. Thanks for joining us again. This is a podcast for everything that you need to know about franchising. Whether you want to buy a franchise, sell a franchise, turn your business into a franchise, everything is at your fingertips and it's all for free. So go through all the past episodes, go to thefranchiseacademy.com, check out the past stuff, a lot of good nuggets of information, best practices, and everything that you need to know. So I'm a consultant during the day. I just play a podcast host at night. So I match people with opportunities based on skills, personality, goals. I help people figure out what franchise is for them and which is not. I help people that are frustrated with their career, people that cringe at the thought of going to work in the morning. And I work with folks that just want to diversify their investments because they're unhappy with their return in their 401k or whatever it might be. So if you are frustrated, let's have a conversation. And if you don't want to talk to me, you could talk to my guest that's coming on right now. I'm bringing to you today a good friend of mine, Matt Stevens. Matt Stevens is the franchise guy, and that is trademarked. So literally, the franchise guy, Matt Stevens, has been with FranChoice, the company I'm with, for 15 years. Matt has been there 19 years. So he's a mentor to me as well. So I want to bring on my good buddy, Matt. How are you, Matt?
I'm good, Tom. Thank you, and I appreciate it. You know, you say that I'm a mentor to you. I think when I look at all my materials, I have more of your signature in there than anyone else.
I doubt it, but I appreciate that. So the cool thing that I didn't mention in that introduction is that Matt and I co-authored a book together called The Road to Franchise Freedom, which I think, in my opinion, is a must-read for anybody who is considering franchising. Or if you're at the very start. It's 21 different kind of myths that people get stuck on when they're looking to buy a franchise. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and whatever else Matt wants to talk about. So
Sounds great. Yeah, people can get really stuck on a bunch of things. It really is kind of behavior modification, if you will, so that people can get to the truth and make an honest decision without ever looking back over their shoulder in regret or remorse or second guessing. That's the goal.
That is the goal. And our goal, I think, collectively is to help people not buy the wrong franchise and lose their life savings, right. Which I did the second time around when I decided to buy a franchise and not talk to a franchise consultant. So I can speak from experience. It's not easy to do on your own. But we have 21 different things that we talk about in that book. What is one of your kind of favorite or most common myths that you run into when somebody calls you and says, Matt, I want to buy a franchise, and they say something that you're like, you cringe?
Well, the cringe is always internal until we get to know each other better. And then it becomes external and candid, and it's usually a wonderful and thorough conversation at that point, which is a good place to be. But usually it's the hope that something about the logo or the business will make them jump for joy. You know, how many people ran off to Quiznos? I remember when Quiznos was advertising on the Super Bowl. You know, but how many people ran off to Quiznos, and with all due respect to those who did make it, didn't make it. Unfortunately, the buyer loved to eat the sandwich and like the location and the idea of sponsoring something that made people feel good, but they didn't do their research in terms of what it took to make the financial results work. And Quiznos was just so popular, it brought a lot of people on board who weren't up to the task.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. It's so many people make the decision from a consumer perspective instead of the business perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're taught, all of us are taught to go to school and get a job. We're not taught to go to school and buy a business,
Right. Never. It should be mandatory, but it's not.
Right. You should know something about it, especially when you're trying to, chew down the owner to get a better price. The guy's got to make some money. You got to realize that there's a lot of cost that goes into running a business. A story that comes to mind is a couple of years ago, I was a Maui Wowie smoothie franchise operator, and I had a great location, which was Jones Beach Amphitheater. It was outdoor concerts in the summer. We did, around 40 concerts during the summer at night. And one day it was a really, really, really hot night, and it was a sold out crowd. And I had a line about 40 people deep during the intermission. And some guy standing there, and he's like, drinking his drink. He's like, "Oh, you're the owner? Man, you're raking it in." And it struck a chord with me and made me angry, because I said to him, "It looks like it, but do you have any idea what my rent is in this location? It's unbelievably high."
Right.
And how much it costs, to have these kids working. I was paying more than minimum wage, but so much goes into it, the cost of the product. And so people have misnomers about, they're raking it in. There's a line, a guy said to me, every time I pass by Auntie Anne's, there's a line at the pretzel place in the mall. And I'm like, yeah, but count how many people are behind the counter. When we got 8 people at $10 an hour, it gets expensive real fast. So you got to sell a lot of $3 pretzels to make the money.
Yeah, it's something else. Even in my service business I had 5 crews going at one time, and out of the thousands of jobs I oversaw, I only had 2 customers not paying me in full. And one of them wanted $80 off. I gave her good friend, and I didn't know they were both good friends, but I was trying to achieve a goal, so I gave a good friend of hers kind of a deal. Well, she caught wind of it, and she wanted a deal too. Okay, so she wanted $80 off. Doesn't sound like a big deal. But on an $1,100 job, that was just $80 to her, but it was about 40% of my profit, of my gross profit.
Yeah.
And it was a hit. And, I could have had that crew doing things elsewhere. And you realize that if you're making 20% on margin on a job in any business, and you give a 20% discount to the consumer, it's 20%, but to the owner, it's 100%. It's 100% of the profit.
That's right.
All of a sudden, you're working for free, and it really doesn't hit you until you're the business owner making that decision and going in that route. You somehow try to figure out a way to write it off as marketing or goodwill, but it still can leave a sour taste. Oh well.
Yeah, no question. Even when you have, you'll have maybe in the smoothie operation, maybe my kids are working for me, and their friends come and they give away 3 smoothies for free.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're like, it's no big deal, but the product, the fruit, the cup, the straw, the little umbrella, it's all money.
Right.
Somebody's paying for it, and it seems to be me.
Right. All of that happens in the margins. And it's that's one of the things we point out there in the book is that's part of it, and getting the truth from the franchise owners to what it takes to avoid that and make money, and focus on the facts. But yeah, life and profitability all happens in the margins, right? We all have 8 hours of work to do. We all have X amount of dollars to spend. It's what you're able to somehow squirrel away on top of that, or in addition to that really gives you the advantage you're looking for. And I don't know, I'm a big fan of business ownership to do it.
Right. So you've owned and operated franchises, and I think private businesses too, right?
Well, I had 14 rental properties at one time. I had a painting business. I have this business now. This is the one I've held the longest for nearly 20 years. I was involved in a dance school where we had 3 locations up and running. That was interesting because it had a profit component and a nonprofit component, which means it all turned into nonprofit. But you get to see it from every angle, and you get to see what works and what doesn't. And luckily, I got in at an early age. I signed my first franchise agreement when I was 19 years old. I was in my 20th birthday, and learned a lot at an early age, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the first one?
The first one was the predecessor to Certapro painters. And Certapro now is a huge organization doing just under $1 billion a year. But at the time I came on board, there were 67 of us kind of gunslinging around North America trying to figure it out. And luckily the franchisor had invested time and resources in professional management techniques, even for people like me, a 20-year-old with a pimply face and not really a master of my schedule. But they taught us. It was the best learning experience I ever had. We went through so much. It was the toughest experience I ever had too. But
wow,
an incredible learning experience.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
At 20 years old, that's so cool. That's so great. So how do you feel about passion? When somebody comes to you and they're like, yeah, I want to find a business that I'm really passionate about. What's your answer to that?
Well, probably similar to you, Tom. We always ask about why. We always ask what makes them feel that way. But then, you kind of go into the questions about, all right, who else do you know who's taken on their passion and is making a living out of it? And I think what most people find in passion is that the role of you in your business is extremely important. You can't adopt a role that you don't want to engage in. But if the business itself is all about your passion, I've written about this elsewhere. It's where you basically are turning a closet mistress into a spouse. And the expectations become entirely different when your passion now is responsible for your mortgage and your children's education and your retirement. It's no longer your passion, it's your master. And you start not loving it. You used to love it because you could come and go as you please, and now you can't. I think that's a punch between the eyes for a lot of people who realize that and realize, okay, I'll keep my passion over here. What if I could do really well financially over here and take those rewards and apply them here as I wish?
Right.
And I think that's what you and I point out in the book as well. I think that's probably a better idea. I
think the misnomer that people come to us with is, you hear that axiom, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Sure.
And that's probably true if you're working a job, but a business or a franchise is not a job. Mm-hmm. So, right, I had these two guys who came to me from Wall Street. They wanted to buy a golf franchise. Why? Because they love to golf. And so I said, hey, I could show you something like Golfsmith. You're going to be selling golf equipment in a store. I said, how about if you follow our process and we try to find you a business where you can golf to your heart's content? Because if you are trying to pay your bills with golf, you're going to end up hating golf in 6 months, guaranteed.
Unfortunately.
Right? So they're like, hey, all right, we'll entertain your idea. Let's give this a shot. And then they got to see the light, and they ended up getting into a home healthcare franchise. So that business is giving them all the time and the money to golf whenever they want, wherever they want. So they could go to Europe and golf in Scotland, where golf was created. They could do whatever they want.
Right.
At the time and the money. Don't get me wrong, it didn't happen overnight. They had to build that business, of course. Mm-hmm. But if you're open-minded, there's a lot of opportunities out there that you would never think about that are way more lucrative than whatever you think your passion is, right?
Yeah, that's a critical component, Tom. I think is all we're trying to do is get people to, here's a place you want to, here's the thing you might want to do, but here's the thing where your ownership criteria are really screaming and matching. And all we're asking is be open-minded enough to compare the two against each other and go in whatever direction you want to go. But let's learn those facts and figure it out. And it is amazing how many people admit to me somewhere late in the process, they probably do with you too, but somewhere in the process, once we built some rapport, we've built some sustained trust, maybe they're about to make their decision or mentally they already have, and they say to me, hey, Matt, we got a secret. When you first introduced us to this opportunity, we thought you were nuts, or you weren't listening, or you were trying to pitch something, or you had it in with the franchise developers, right? And then they saw the standoffish and coaching behavior that we engaged in, and they fully made their own decision to go in that direction. Maybe with one franchise, maybe with 3 units or 5 units. But it's a jovial moment. We have some laughs about it and realize, frankly, how far they've come. It typically takes several weeks or a couple months to get there. But you're absolutely right. You have to be open-minded and willing to explore some options to really not look back over your shoulder with any kind of guesswork or regret.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. I feel that that's what we're here to do, is help people choose businesses the correct way. There's a lot of people who call me up, they're like, I don't think I really need your help. I know what I want. And that is like a major, that makes me like, wait a second, I can't, you don't need me. Of course, you can go do it yourself. But chances are not good that you're going to actually succeed, because you just don't know. There's so much misnomer. I mean, the myths that we hear so often, like, oh my God, I was on vacation and I saw this great franchise. I want to do it in my town. There's none in my town.
Right. There's a reason for that. 5 reasons for that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I've got a wonderful candidate right now I'm working with. He's a McDonald's employee, and I'm not talking out of school. He does very well with them. He survived a cut that happened in July, but he realizes his time could be limited, or it might not. So he called me up, and he's been in that franchise world now for decades, catering to their employees. And we talked about 3 different options in his case. One of which was food, and inevitably food is the one he's least interested in. And the one he's most interested in is a property services type of franchise. And he sees the opportunity, he sees the ROI, he sees all the things that he's probably sick of, frankly, in the food industry, but also financially just makes a lot more sense to him. And,
right.
That's a great experience for everybody.
That is such a great experience, and kudos to you for showing them the way. And that's what we do. We're making suggestions. The candidates make decisions. It's just all about education. The service we provide is 100% free. So it's crazy not to engage a franchise consultant, like us or anyone in franchise. It's like trying to buy a house without consulting a real estate agent. I mean, you could do it, but it's going to take a lot of work and spend a lot of time that's already been done vetting what houses are best. Right. So I think that's a really big thing to consider, if you're thinking about a franchise. And Matt's information will be below the video, by the way, if anybody's interested in talking to Matt. And we both work around the country, so no matter where you live, you could talk to Matt. And all his contact information will be down there. But Matt, what else do you come up against? What do you hear often that kind of makes you cringe?
The struggle is, and I think this is our human nature, and you and I probably have done the same thing, if not yesterday. I think it's human nature. It's ingrained in us where we might tend to believe the lie that agrees with us, that's comfortable, rather than the truth that's uncomfortable. And people might often point that to politics, and it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. You always think the other side's doing that. But the interesting thing is you and I have seen that for 2 decades in our candidates. It's just so much easier to tack on a belief to something or a prejudice that just you can't find anything supporting it. You can't find a backup. And I always like to use my historical company with Certapro as an example. I mean, when if you ask someone, what do you think a painting contractor does in a year? They're shocked if they ever need to or want to learn what an average Certapro, in this example, painting franchisee does in a year. They're shocked to learn that there's someone in water removal in the Midwest doing $45 million a year, that there's a plumber in the Midwest doing $11 million a year.
Right.
There's a painter doing $47 million a year. It's amazing what you can do when a good person latches on to a great system. They throw down their preconceived notions and just open up to what can be. And it's amazing to how big these businesses can grow in the franchise world.
Oh, yeah. No question. People don't grasp that. Everybody, a misnomer or myth that's out there is that the franchisor, the franchise company, is the one that makes the money. The franchisee doesn't make any money.
Right.
Not true. I mean, in some cases, that's probably true. But in most cases, it's a symbiotic relationship. The franchisor takes a little piece. The franchisee keeps it. And when they sell it, they keep 100% of the profit except for the transfer fee. So you could build something really big and sell it and have a real significant liquidity event, which is why you might want to do a business as opposed to a job, right? I mean, one of the best analogies I ever heard is that a job is like renting an apartment, and owning a business is like owning a home.
Yeah, that's a great point. Interesting. You and I both know Ray in Maryland, but our cohort placed a gentleman in Maine in a franchise 14 years ago. And I just had a candidate, buy that franchise from Ray's placement. 14 years later, the gentleman, when he got into the business, probably invested right around $100,000 to $150,000 in the business. My buyer bought it from him for $860,000.
Right.
And the seller made a bunch of money along the way, and now he's retired. And those things happen. Those things happen all the time. I will say, you asked me what surprises me. Once in a while, I do get a candidate. It's not too often, but probably once or twice a month, where they really don't understand that you can sell for more than you invested.
Yeah.
And frankly, if you do it right at all, that's the goal. That's the plan.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
You got to go in with the end goal in mind. No question.
Yeah. And the gentleman I placed up in Western Michigan called me last week. He's been in it for 5 years in his business, but he's just ready for a new challenge. And he took a business from zero to, he's doing a little over $500,000 in revenue this year. He has over 1,000 recurring customers.
Right.
That's a great business for someone to jump into and pay their monthly debt service without any issues.
Yeah. And that's sometimes an option for people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Resales are tough to find a really good one to buy.
They are.
A lot of people feel like, I want to buy a resale because I don't want to do the marketing and build it. You could do that, but then you're going to pay for it. And usually there's no room for growth. Whatever you pay for it is going to be about what you're going to sell it for. And
resales are tough. If you try to find the perfect resale, you're not going to find it. What you find is it's either a fire sale that's underpriced or that's priced low on purpose, or you're going to find it generating the income that you want, but you're going to pay for that. You're going to pay 2 to 4 times net earnings for that, sometimes more.
That's right.
So which pill do you want to swallow? Do you want to fix it, pay a little bit and fix it, or do you want to pay what it's worth and pay off that debt service for the next 10 years? And
right.
Finding the perfect resale is like finding a needle in a haystack.
Or like our colleague Rick said in Florida, the other option, the third option, is you find something that is going well, but there's still a lot of room for growth. And so typically what happens in that situation is a local franchise owner already in the system will buy it because they know what the value is and what it's going to take to get it to the end goal of selling it for 2 to 4 times yearly earnings. So that's another interesting thing, right?
Agreed. I think it's an eye-opener, too, for people to realize that sometimes franchise resales, if it's a great system, there's a bunch of owners in the system who are already running in absentia, if they're running it manager run, or they have multiple locations elsewhere, chances are they could snap it up easily. They don't have a transfer fee. They don't have a commission to pay. And the public never learns about it. Other people are surprised to learn that franchisors would rather have an existing franchisee buy the resale.
That's right.
They can make it available to the newbie on the street that you or I may work with. Or even the experienced franchise owner who just owns a different brand, right? There's all kinds of nuances. And I think that when people finally get to the end of the process and look back and think of all the things that they've learned, they're often astounded. And I think it's great to see how far people come throughout the process.
I love that. And it's so important to understand the nuances. don't know, because she's not done it before. So we're here to help, and we love what we do. That's why we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. So I get really excited about this stuff sometimes. I just let stuff fly out of my mouth. And so I was working with a person I've known for about 12, 14 years last week. And he asked me a question that just struck a chord where I probably knew too much to share, but I felt I'd drop it on him anyway. And I just rambled for about 30 seconds. And we were doing a call like this, actually. It was a Zoom meeting. And he just looked at me and kind of stunned, and he said, "You really dropped a lot on me right there. Can we kind of unpack that?" And it's true. It's fun to know, but that's some improvement. I guess I need.
So, Matt, let me ask you this: what's the best advice that you've ever received in business?
Oh boy, probably that, and it took some experience to engage in it, but probably just that. Compounding occurs in everything. And I think I probably had that hammered into me 27 times. But most people think of compounding with money, with interest, and things like that.
Yeah.
But compounding occurs in absolutely everything. And I look at that like this: the sooner you start, the better off you are. So just imagine if your child began running at age 3. Let's take it back. Running at age 18 months. Sprinting at age 5, right? Where would they be at age 13, 18, and 20? I have a daughter who started whistling at 18 months. Nobody believed me. No one believed me. Matt, you're nuts. You're making stuff up. Finally, at school one day or at daycare, the teacher pulls me aside when I go to pick her up and said, "Your daughter whistled today." That's when my wife believed me, too. She whistles like a maniac now. She's 12 and she's just crazy. So compounding. The sooner you start, the sooner you learn, the sooner you get to reflect, the sooner you get to pile that information in your backpack and use it for life. And I think that's the advantage of, for instance, with people who go to a great school that teaches something in particular, people who have parents who knew something. I mean, Zuckerberg's dad, at least, was a programmer. All right.
Right.
Helps. Doesn't hurt to do what he's doing. But yeah, the sooner you learn, the better off you are. So that's the long answer to that question. Compounding affects everything.
Well, the quicker you learn, the quicker you earn.
There you go. Yeah.
New favorite phrases.
There you go.
So we want to teach you fast so you can get going and hit the ground running and make some money, change some lives. Every business that opens up creates 20 jobs in the community, so you're an economic engine locally. So it's not all just about you, but as a franchise owner, but it's about the people that you're helping put food on the table. And so there's so many altruistic things about franchising too that just can't be ignored.
Absolutely agreed. And there's some great franchises out there, and there's some not so wonderful ones. We don't mention names, but we invest our time in helping people look at the ones that are worth their while.
That's it, and you just don't know what you don't know. And if you've never owned a franchise, don't assume that you know. You can look at something and say, "Oh, they have a line every night, so that must be something great." That is not the case. Most often, it's not the case. The trends, the flesh in the pan things, you want to stay away from that kind of stuff because it's here today, gone tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm. What's interesting there, Tom, is what's a flash in the pan to one person isn't to another. And it doesn't matter what you and I think about it. It is interesting. I've seen, I've placed people in the exact same business side by side, and I even managed a couple in the Boston area back in the 90s, and one probably fared worse than anyone I've seen, and one was fared better than anyone I've seen in that business. And they were literally adjacent. They shared a border. Oh. It's interesting how behavior affects all that.
Well, you know what? You bring up a great point, and I got to share a quick story.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up. So in 2002, I was franchisee of the year for Maui Wowie Smoothies. So top producer, kicking butt, doing great. And some friends of mine who were actually neighbors a few houses down the street decided that they wanted to be a Maui Wowie smoothie operator too, because they saw how fun it was. With you wear a Hawaiian shirt, you're making drinks like Tom Cruise and Cocktail. It's like just a great vibe. Got reggae music playing. It's like being on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm franchisee of the year. They're in that business for maybe a year, maybe two, and they go belly up. Meanwhile, I'm same demographic. We live on the same street. What they didn't realize is that making the smoothies was one part of the business, a very small part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Getting up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday to go to the produce distributor to get your bananas and your fruit for the show for the day is really where the business begins. And some people just don't want to wake up at 6 a.m. to go to the produce guy. Right. So you got to really think about the day in the life of really what it takes to operate the business.
Mm-hmm.
Important. I could tell you a million stories about that kind of thing, but it's really, really important to understand what it's going to take every single day. So
absolutely, you can't go against your values. You don't have to love what the business does, but let's assume it's moral and ethical. You have to enjoy your role.
Right.
And if you don't enjoy your role, you probably should think of not doing it.
Yep. That's probably the greatest piece of advice you could give somebody right here.
I agree.
Cool. Well, Matt, I thank you for being on the Franchise Academy podcast. This has been awesome.
Thanks a lot, Tom. I appreciate it. It's great to see you today.
Yeah. We should probably do a lot more. So if you're watching this podcast or listening, listen out for more Matt Stevens. And Matt, where can people contact you, by the way?
Well, I'm the franchise guy. If you go to the website, heisthefranchiseguy.com, or call me directly on my cell phone, 614-595-FRAN. That's 614-595-3726.
Cool, man. And again, that's all going to be on the franchiseacademy.com. You could pick that up there. And also you could pick up the book that Matt and I wrote called The Road to Franchise Freedom. It's on Amazon, and that's The Road to Franchise Freedom. It's actually an ebook, small. I think it's like $1.99 or $2.99 to buy the book. But it'll give you 21 things to not do when you're purchasing a franchise.
Nice and easy.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. And
thanks, Tom.
We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, buddy.
Have a great one.
This has been another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. For more info, go to our website, thefranchiseacademypodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Tom Scarda's YouTube channel for educational videos on franchising, education, insight, and inspiration.